Welcome to the latest edition of Crack and the Bat. My name is Shaun Clancy. I'm president of the Irish American Baseball Hall of Fame. Uh, Crack and the Bat is a little ditty that we run for the members of the Irish American Baseball Society. The Irish American Baseball Society is a society of Irish people who love baseball and baseball people who love Ireland. I'm delighted to be joined this week. My guest is Slim Jim Phantom from the best known for the Stray Cats. And Jim, I first of all thank you for doing this. Uh, I am blown away by that window behind you. I think I could just look at that all day. And before we go any further, I want, because I forgot to do this the last time, I want to tell you that by being on this show, you will become an honorary member of the Irish American Baseball Society, and you get to see what we're doing. And also you get to participate in some of the stuff that we've gone. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being a part of this. So my first question is, where are you? Where's home for you now?
We are in Los Angeles for 30 plus years. I grew up in New York, and believe it or not, Phantom's not my last name.
Believe me,
Given
I
last
know
name.
we're gonna cover all of that in a couple of minutes.
Excellent. We are in Beverly Glen, in LA.
Very, very nice. Well, as you adhered to, you were born Jim McDonald.
Yes, James.
Good Italian name there. And Jim, you were born in one of the places that I always wanted to live, and the only reason why I wanted to live there was I used to love singing and I used to love hearing it on the Long Island Railroad. You're a Massapequa boy.
Yes, we grew up in Massapequa. We were born in Flatbush in Brooklyn, and spent our earlier years in Flatbush and in Bay Ridge, where my where where all the Irish were.
I was
And
going to say it was mandatory. It was mandatory to have a last name like McDonald.
yes, and my mother was
Now,
Doyle.
oh wow! So you're double barreled. Very
Yeah,
nice. Now, do you know where your folks are from? I mean, how far back do we need to go before we find the
uh,
McDonald's in Ireland?
my father did the research. It was Cork, and I think they came over in the early 1900s.
So now, as a kid growing up, what what did being Irish mean to you? I mean, as a kid growing up in Brooklyn on Long Island.
Well, it seemed to me that's really we were brought. Even though my nana Doyle, that we spent most of our time there. I think she was what they would call the anchor baby at this point, and she was born in New York City, and she must have had that in her upbringing, because our house was very, lace curtain. I think every week, every Sunday we went, and it seemed to me that's how they did it in the old country. And then later in life, traveling to England and then to to Ireland, it looked like my nana's house. So
Right.
they I think my nan, and then my own parents' house. I think they kept with the tradition of it all. It was less quaint, but it was definitely an Irish household for
Right.
all intent and
So you
purpose.
were very conscious of the fact that you were Irish or Irish
Oh yeah.
American as a kid growing up.
Yes, yes. My father, all my uncles were Hibernian Club, and they're all on the cops in the fire department. Yes, it was very New York Irish, I suppose.
Right. Hey, listen, that's the built the city. As someone once said, the reason why God invented alcohol was to stop the Irish from ruling the world. Now, the great thing about Irish is you don't have to go too far back before you find like a common, um, a common connector, or if you like.
Right.
Uh, so we kind of have a connection of sorts. A good buddy of mine is a guy by the name of Pete Fogo, and Pete he's very much and he was a guy that was responsible for getting Steely Dan back together, and Pete worked with LeBarbat. But way back before that, Pete pitched against you when you were at Massapequa and he was at Oceanside. Now I
High
couldn't
school.
get him to. yeah, I couldn't get him to tell me how good you were or how good he was, but you know, and he said, "Hey, if you want to throw a name at Jim," he said he couldn't remember if he was at one of the shows, but he said, "Ask him about." I'm going to butcher this. Is it Phineas Tees?
Phineas Tees, yes, totally. That was one of the clubs that the Stray Cats played at before the Stray Cats were overnight sensations. We played 5 nights a week, 4 sets a night for a year or so. And one of the bars was Phineas Tees. I think it was Rockville Center or one of the train lines. Long Island, the South Shore is mainly like a train line
Oh yeah,
goes out.
it's like this,
I'd go
right?
out of Penn Station, and Phineas Tees was maybe Rockville Center or one of those ones along the line.
Yeah, he said it was owned by a guy called David
Yeah,
Cavell.
that makes sense. I think he was a good guy. He owned a couple of the, he owned that one and like another one that we played at, I think, the Yankee Clipper.
Okay, so now you mentioned Yankee. I gotta ask you this. So as you know, we talked to your buddy from the House of Pain last
Danny Boy, yeah.
yes, and so now here we have a guy that spent his life between Long Island and Bro. You're a Yankee fan?
Yes. Um, Geographically, we would have been Mets people, and I'm
Yeah.
not against the Mets in any way, but I'm a baseball nerd, and I was drawn to the history of the Yankees, the 27 Yankees, et cetera, Mickey Mantle, all through those years. And I had an uncle who was a Yankees fan. We went to a lot of Met games, but a few times a year, I had an uncle who would take me up to the Bronx and watch the games. So seeing Yankee Stadium as a young lad, and just being able to pour over that much more history, uh, I felt a connection to the Yankees.
Actually, you know, it's funny. Um, Obviously, I grew up in Ireland, but my parents had been married here and were born, and you know, I moved back to Ireland just before I was born. But my father worked in Touch Shores, and
Okay.
so he took care of a lot of the Yankees. And how I became well, I'm not right now. I'm more of a baseball fan because I have a lot of friends with a lot of teams. But
Yeah.
initially, how I got involved with baseball was I fell in love with the history of not just the Yankees, but also the history of the game. You
Yes.
know, and the fact that baseball is constantly folding in on itself. You know what I mean? It's like you can't. Hopefully, you know, if the strike ever ends, but hopefully, you know, you can't listen to a game without them. They're bringing up a player from 25 or you know 30 years ago, or whether it be I mean, it doesn't happen in other sports. It doesn't happen in football. I mean, every now and then they may, but yeah, every
That,
baseball game they're going to compare about, well, this guy did this or this guy did that. But I want to talk to you about um, obviously your music career. Um, I found it. I sent John. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to show it or not, but I uh, I had a poster of the Stray Cats on my wall as a kid growing up. Now, okay, let me rephrase that. More so, it actually was the cover of Smash Hits, which was
okay.
a magazine that that I would read.
Sure.
Now, you guys were the only reason why you guys were there was Kim Wilde was also on the cover, and she was probably still is. She was kind of hot, so you guys ended up upside down on my wall as a kid. It's funny because when John first mentioned this, and I was thinking back to if I could explain to my 17 and 18-year-old self as I was bopping to Rock This Town and some of the nightclubs in Ireland, that at one point I would be sitting here talking to the man who was singing that song. It was like weird. And then I I had tickets to a show one time, the Stray Cats in Dublin, that got I think it got canceled. Did you break your wrist?
Yes, this was maybe about 10, 12 years ago. Yes. Yes. In London, I had fallen off of the stage and broke my arm. And that was the end of the tour. And the last few shows, we had done a multiple week tour, and the final shows were going to be in UK. We did London, I think it was maybe two, and then there was Glasgow, Manchester, and we were going to end up in Dublin that we're all really looking forward to, and couldn't be helped.
Was that and the last connection we might have is so right now, or according to the wonderful world of Wikipedia, you are collaborating with Imelda May,
Yes, I had
and
done a record with her former husband, Daryl Hyam, who is my dear pal, and he and Imelda worked together a lot. And I would go stay with them. Their studio was nearby the house, and we did quite a few songs together, and we stay in touch. She's
I used to
she's
see
awesome,
her perform in Dublin. She played in like a nightclub called Bruxelles.
fantastic.
That's going way back, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
she and her former husband Daryl Hyam, awesome people in my life, and I stay close with everybody.
I don't know if you ever got to see where she's from. She's from the Liberties in Dublin. It's one of my favorite parts. It's right by
Fantastic.
the Guinness Brewery.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, we've been to
it's a
Dublin.
very, very, very cool part of it.
I love it there.
So, right, so yourself and Brian and Lee Rock, Brian Salsa and Lee Rocker formed Stray Cats,
Yes.
and I mean, it was. I mean, how do you describe that ride? I mean, it was. Now you look back on it now,
Well, what's funny is more time has elapsed from when we formed and when we did Rock This Town, Runaway Boys, first few songs, till now, 40 plus years, than had elapsed from the original rock and rollers, Gene Vincent,
right?
Bebop Balula, Eddie Cochran, 20 Flat Rock, the first songs that we became our whole lives were influenced by. Up until then, it had only been 20 something years. And now, since the Stray Cats were influenced by it, it's been 40 years. It's kind of funny old follow the history of rock. Um, we were the guys in school that were musician guys, always. Would have been us who playing at the school dance, or there's a group of musicians, 10 or 12 in any school. And Lee and I were the bass player and the drummer for our, and Brian, who now it doesn't matter because everyone's old, but at a certain point when someone's 13 to someone being 15 is a big difference. Someone being
Right.
11 years old playing in the garage to be someone who's 13 who could be playing at a little function. So we were always those guys. And when I was 18 years old, uh, we all, around the same time, discovered rockabilly music. We loved um, rock and roll, and we were all students of music. We all took lessons and played, but we were rock and rollers. Um, and at the same time, we all discovered the original rock and rollers. Um, of course, you knew who Elvis Presley was, but you didn't know so much the original rockabilly records. And you're starting to discover the records that you already had in your house, whether it's the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or Clapton or whoever it is that you like, the Who, and just reading. You're getting to the point in life where you start to look a bit more at the liner notes, and you start to see names like B. Holly, E. Cochran, C. Berry, you know who Chuck Berry was, but uh, discovering the names. And that leads to the original Elvis Presley Sun Sessions, and that leads to Johnny Burnett, and that leads to Gene Vincent, and that leads to The Who, Summertime Blues, E. Cochran. Well, he's not one of The Who. Who's E. Cochran? And so the minute that we discovered the original rock and rollers and got your hands on the records, which were not in the regular record store, to kind of find a little bit a deeper search, and you find Eddie Cochran and Gene Vincent and Johnny Burnett and the original like Jerry Lee Lewis and Buddy Holly film was just coming out. So it became very briefly accessible, and we just fell into it. Everything. In one day, after hearing Elvis Presley's Sun Sessions, I personally went from having long hair, maybe looking more like Peter Frampton's album cover, who is also a rockabilly boy, by the way. That's what you discover in life, is everyone loves those records. Um, to having my hair cut like Elvis Presley and going in with flare jeans, Adidas, and a tennis shirt to St. Mark's Place in New York City, and slowly replacing each one with each shop. Got my hair cut, then I had a haircut and tennis shirt and flares and Adidas on. At the next place, I found a bowling shirt, so I had a haircut and a bowling shirt and flares and Adidas. The next place, I found some baggy pleated pants. So then I had a bowling shirt, some baggy pleated pants, a haircut, and Adidas. The last store, I found some creepers or some black pointy shoes, whatever the first ones were, and then became complete. And I took the train back to Massapequa, 47 minutes, and just, this is who I am now. I was the same person, but looked completely different. And me and the other two guys had had a similar experience, and it was clear. One played bass, one played the drums, one played the guitar. Let's do
Because
this.
I mean, we're talking about what are we talking about? Late 70s.
This would have been 1979.
So I mean, at that time, I mean, it was. I mean, rockabilly wasn't the music of choice. Like
No,
it wouldn't.
no.
I mean, I've always loved. I mean, growing up, I mean, I grew up. My father had all those records, Eddie
Yeah,
Cochran and Buddy Holly and all that kind of stuff. And like, I mean, that's I think why like songs like "Rock This Town" and where there's something very uplifting about it.
timeless is
And
what
actually,
I
it's kind of
thought.
funny. But you mentioned, you mentioned, that'll be the day, which is, I guess, that'll be the day where you got the name Stray Cats, the movie.
Well, that's a funny part of the story, is that that'll be the day, and Stardust, the two David Essex movies that hearken to Teddy Boy era and to that, were never released in the States. And we didn't really know about that. We were called Tomcats. And sometimes that's what we were known as when we played on Long Island. A few times a month, you would go and play in New York City, CBGB's, Max's Kansas City, Hurrah, Mud Club, all the famous joints like that. But you couldn't really use the same name every time, um, because the
Or
where he
you
was at
wouldn't get booked.
draw would be affected, right? You had to make it a
Right.
special thing. So we were called Tomcats. And uh, after playing around in New York for about a year, we were restless. We were doing quite well. I think it would have been the same type of success, but we decided to go to England because that's where Teddy Boys were from. That's where punk rock was from. We got a few copies of NME and Melody Maker, and we had a vibe that there was a scene there. Even though there might have been a very, very small scene, there was nothing. But we were looking for, I mean, if there were four other people
Right.
in New York, then we wouldn't have left, because we were drawing very good crowds, but there was no other rockabilly types. It was the three of us who were tooled up 24/7 and just having aggro, more or less, except at the shows where we had a fantastic following, 100 people or so that would go everywhere, but they weren't rockabilly people. They were very much of that time and era. But we were the local eccentrics, I suppose, and it was really good rock and roll. But we wanted to expand our horizons. So we went to England, and after being homeless for a while and knocking around, we got the attention of some record companies, because a bunch of faces would start to come see us, starting with the Pretenders and the Clash and Ray Davis from the Kinks, and that led to really the whole Rolling Stones coming out to see us play. This is over the course of about 10 shows, and it
Wow.
became very in vogue and lightning in a bottle that that you had to see this new band from New York, and we had a built-in story that we were virtually homeless and somehow turning up and getting enough equipment to play these shows. And since we had played in New York, we were very good at it, and we looked quite outrageous, and we had a built-in story, and we were Americans, which seemed to have made a big deal. And only then did we meet Dave Edmunds, who became our record producer, and we went to his home to meet with him, and he was in That'll Be the Day and Stardust in a fictional band called the Stray Cats, which was very ironic because we hadn't seen those movies. We were Tomcats, Blue Caps. We were trying to come up with the perfect Cats name.
Right.
And we felt like Stray Cats. We had nowhere to live. We were virtually homeless. And I think Lee Rocker, in one of the times, he was saying, "How about the Space Cats? How about the Wildcats? How about the Blue?" In that conversation, the three of us came up with Stray Cats, and it hit between us. We called ourselves that, and it was reinforced when we went to meet with Edmunds, who had a picture of it on his wall. Keith Moon being the drummer, Stray Cats was on a double bass drum. But I can honestly say that I did not know about that before we met Dave Edmunds.
I have seen both those movies. I saw them growing up, and I love both of them. I always thought David Essex was one of those guys that never got the credit he should have been. I mean, for most people, he's just known as the guy who sings that Christmas song, "Winter's Tale." You know. So I do have a couple of questions for you. So, as a drummer, and you mentioned Keith Moon, uh, do you have drumming icons, or you
Oh,
know?
yeah. A couple of drumming icons for me would have been the original ones that I loved. Ringo, of course, the beautiful Ringo is the greatest. Charlie Watts, Charlie's Good Tonight, and all these cats became my friends, and they came to see the Stray Cats play, and were drummers, and everyone stayed in touch for 100 years. Um, Back then, in that exact time, Topper Headon was my friend and a great drummer from the Clash, Martin Chambers, Pretenders, original people that we're still friends with. But my original drum heroes would have been more from the jazz world. Of course, Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa, who I knew I could never be that good. And then the original rockabilly guys, DJ Fontana played the greatest drum roll in history, Hound Dog, Elvis Presley drummer, Dickie Harrell, an original member of the Blue Caps, who was a big influence on us. And these were the original guys, and I had some music training, so we knew how to swing, and we loved jazz swing beat, and we
So
loved
that's
rock, and I loved rock drummers, everyone, and it all came together with when I discovered rockabilly. This was something I think I can do this, because there was some heavy jazz guys, some heavy rock guys, and then there was maybe uh, uh, punk rock, which we loved, but I thought I can put some swing into that, and we were, able to make a style, but certainly based in both of those worlds. And a lot of the original blues guys, I have to say too, Freddie Belo, who played on the Chuck Berry records, he was a very big one. And then Big Eye Smith, Willie Smith, who was on the Muddy Waters records and the Chess records. So all these combinations went into me doing my thing.
So you mentioned something there that I've always wanted to ask someone who would know, and you'd be good. So Ringo is actually a good drummer. I mean,
Amazing.
it's one thing you don't think about with the Beatles, but I mean, I always just thought, he happened to be the drummer for the Beatles.
Ringo is an amazing drummer. If you haven't seen it, I would suggest anyone going and checking out the Get Back documentary, which is relatively new, came out late part of last year, and
Yeah.
you see Ringo play a lot. And I think he was an inventive um, drummer who played for the songs, and certainly had a lot of chops. And I think Ringo, besides his drumming, which is as good as anyone, he's iconic, and he was the drummer that really helped make the drummer part of the group, not just the guy in the back. Like, he had as much dialogue as anyone in the films, and I think he's a
Or he's
and I
quite a
think
character,
a
for
beautiful
sure.
guy. And as a drummer, I don't think you could get by really with just being that ever. I think it has to
Right.
start with being a good musician, and then the other things are possible after that with anybody.
Okay, so a couple of questions before we wrap things up here. Who's the most uh, I don't want to say famous, but I mean, who's the most impressive person you've ever met?
Impressive. Can I throw Larry Mullen into the mix of our favorite drummers too? Because it's
Yeah.
true. It's very true. He's another type. He reminds me of Ringo in a little bit like me. You play for the songs and you're very much part of the group and you have your own identity and your sound is part of what makes the group, but you might not be the heaviest chops guy, right? That's I think Larry's another good example of that. Impressive person. I was fortunate enough to be very friendly with George Harrison and stay in touch with his family very, very closely. And George was my friend. He's way up there. And how I met George was through our common friendship of Carl Perkins, who I have to put Carl Perkins at the top of that list as being just like a Buddha, really. Um, Very, very impressive guy and a lovely guy. I think I've met everybody at this point, and those are two that come right to the top of my list.
So I did my training in the restaurant business in a very exclusive hotel in Dublin called the Berkeley Court, and
Okay.
that was where Larry and Adam Clayton used to hang out. That was like their local, and they were the first people I had ever seen drink beer out of a bottle. Because it was considered, I mean, there was something you did if you're out in the field, but you didn't do it. And
I love
you
it.
know, so I'm going to wrap this up. So baseball fan, baseball nerd, baseball geek.
Yeah, John McGraw all the
Um,
way.
you have so you have an opportunity to have dinner with four people from baseball, living or dead.
Right. I gotta put Babe Ruth for sure. Who would have been a character? Babe Ruth. Um, Certainly, my my favorite player is Mariano Rivera. I would put
Nice
him in
choice.
there. I would put Jackie Robinson in there, and for the fourth, um, Joe D. Joe DiMaggio.
You do know Joe's not going to pick up the check, right?
Oh, I would assume at that kind of dinner there would be no check.
Yeah. He's not. Let's put it this way. He's not even at him for the tip either, because he was. How would I put this? Fiscally prudent. So the final question, obviously, as we're coming in, is it's March and it's the annual month of being Irish. So growing up, was there any Irish music you listened to, or even now? I mean,
Oh
obviously, you
yeah,
mentioned YouTube. What
I'm
did you
very
listen to?
by it. We had the Chieftains and the Clancy brothers in the house, and I'm friendly with to this day and a fan of all the Pogues. Spider Stacy, I spoke to maybe a week ago. Shane's a little bit harder to stay in touch with on a regular basis, but the Stray Cats did a tour with them. Spider's my true pal, longtime pal. Stay in touch with James Fairley, and I love Irish music. I see a very uh, um, a common thread to rockabilly, Irish folk music. It's got a certain swing that if you look back, 2 feet back, it makes complete sense because
Jim,
it's
this has been an absolute
folk
pleasure.
music.
I appreciate you doing this. I wish you well. I'm still blown away by that beautiful window behind you. So this has been Cracking the Bat, brought to you by the Irish American Baseball Society. I'm Shaun Clancy, and once again, thank you to Slim Jim Phantom McDonald. Um, Thank you for doing this. Stay well. We will continue to watch your career
We
blossom,
stay in touch
and
anytime.
hopefully we get a chance at some point down the line. Maybe we'll catch up when things get back to normal and the society starts to do some events, maybe we get out to California and see you guys.
I'm in all the way. I'll come to Dublin too. We're always around.
We'll, hey, with this, listen, I got to remember, I'm the perfect tour guide to take you because uh, Irish guy, own the bar, never tasted alcohol. So I'm your designated driver. So whatever you need to do, trust me, I can get into as much trouble as Shane McGowan. The main problem is I have more teeth than I can drive at the end of the night.
Me too,
And
buddy.
thank you very much.
You got it.
Take care.